The YoloBox Ultra that I'm using right here is an awesome tool for multi-camera live streaming, especially in compact or super portable setups. But one way to create an ultra compact setup with the Ultra is to use a PTZ camera like the OBSBOT Tail 2 that I'm using right now. So today I'll tell you all about how to use the Tail 2 with the YoloBox Ultra along with the Tail Air, both wirelessly and with traditional wired connections. This video is sponsored by OBSBOT, which I am super excited about because I've been using these cameras for several months now and I have been so impressed with them. I had no idea how far webcams and PTZ cameras have come in recent years. So it's been a lot of fun to explore that world in ways that I haven't ever done before, and since the YoloBox is just one of my other favorite pieces of equipment, as you might know, I did really want to put a guide like this together, and I really appreciate OBSBOT's support in making this video possible. And the reason that I did want to focus on OBSBOT cameras specifically for a setup like this is because they pair really well with the YoloBox Ultra, especially if you do want to do a powerful but compact setup for things like events, sports, schools, churches, all that kind of stuff. This is something I really wish I had years ago when I was a teacher and we had to cover events and just run cables and big heavy cameras, and it was very rough. This would have been just a dream. In fact, you might say the OBSBOT cameras would be the obvious choice. Yeah, all right. This will be a pretty comprehensive video, so be sure to use the chapter markers if necessary to jump to a specific part of the workflow that's most relevant to you. But if you have no idea what I'm talking about, or you don't even know where to begin with a setup like this, let's start then at the beginning. First, the YoloBox Ultra that I'm using right here is a multi-camera production suite for live streaming and recording. You can connect 4 HDMI inputs, USB webcam, you have HDMI output, you have audio input, you can build scenes, you can mix audio, you can add graphics, you can do all kinds of stuff just with this without needing to connect it to a computer. It also works with wireless NDI sources and can control PTZ cameras, which is most of what I'll be covering today with the OBSBOT cameras. And PTZ just means cameras that can pan, tilt, and zoom remotely. You don't need to attach them to, a ball mount, a video head on a tripod. The cameras themselves can actually move. And everything I'm using in the YoloBox Ultra today also does apply to the YoloBox Extreme, which, as the name implies, is a more extreme version with 8 HDMI inputs, more powerful processing power, and some other cool features as well. Everything in terms of how these cameras compare and connect to it works exactly the same on the YoloBox Extreme. And just a quick note that if I cut to this shot where it's the screen recording from the YoloBox, and sometimes it might look a little bit stuttery, that just has to do with how I'm recording the preview output from the YoloBox. That's not the cameras actually looking stuttery or the YoloBox's stream actually looking stuttery. The actual video I'm recording is going to this SSD that's connected to the YoloBox, but both of the OBSBOT cameras do have micro SD ports, so you can record directly internally with the cameras themselves too, if you need to or you want to for a backup or something. And both the cameras I'm using today are 4K capable, and the YoloBox Ultra does have some limited 4K capabilities, but this is a 1080 workflow because with the YoloBox Ultra, pretty much anytime you start to create complex scenes or mix multiple sources, you kind of get bumped down into that 1080 workflow. So just know that if you're using the Ultra as your primary production suite, even with 4K cameras, you'll probably need to be in a 1080 workflow. The YoloBox Extreme does have some more powerful 4K capabilities. You can do a little bit more in 4K there. So if you need a fully native 4K workflow with, 2, maybe 3 cameras, the Extreme might be something to look at. Now, like I said a moment ago, the main camera I'm using today for this setup is the OBSBOT Tail 2, which is kind of their flagship PTZR camera. Honestly, calling it a webcam almost feels like an understatement because it is a higher end camera designed for maybe more complex or production or just higher level workflows and projects. It's not something that you just need for like random Zoom calls, but it is, I need to do a whole separate video on this camera because it is really cool. And you might notice I did say it is a PTZR camera, not just PTZ. So it can P, it can T, it can Z, and it can also rotate. That's what the R is for. That means internally the camera can actually adjust and rotate and auto level itself. And I actually did not notice until I'm recording right now, but the tripod that the camera's on is crooked. And the reason I didn't notice is because as soon as I turned it on, it just auto leveled itself and made the shot flat, which is super cool. If for some reason you wanted to kind of like get a Dutch angle and do a crooked angle for, you know, out of necessity or stylistic choice, you can also do that as well. And the Tail 2 also has an optical zoom, so when I zoom in, the lens actually physically moves. It's not a digital zoom, which is super cool. You can see it moving in and out, and that means you can zoom in without losing any quality in your subject. And I can go back to my preset angle right here, and now we're ready to go. Now, another reason I wanted to use these two cameras specifically is because they are kind of similar in their features. The Tail 2 is, you know, the flagship model, and the Tail Air is kind of the sibling, the smaller sibling to that, but both of them have their own built-in batteries. Both of them also have their own built-in transmitters, so you can actually stream directly from these cameras. They're also both NDI capable, and they're also fully gesture controlled if you need to. So like I can hold up my hand right now, I'll see the light on the camera turn blue to acknowledge it is tracking me, and now this camera is tracking me, and that way I can move around, be super flexible. I love doing this during my own live streams where I'm controlling them and I have to be on camera, and that way I can move around and do stuff, and I know that I'm always going to be in the frame. So I really like the tracking, and I can just hold up my hand again to turn the tracking off, and now the camera is not going to track me. You can turn on and off the different gesture controls in the OBSBOT desktop and smartphone apps, which I will talk about in more detail in just a little bit. Now, as I just implied, one of the best ways to keep a setup compact and minimal is to get rid of as many cables and wires as possible. So when you're using the YoloBox Ultra and the Tail 2 and the Tail Air, you can actually have this be an entirely wireless setup because all of these devices are NDI capable. Now, I am completely happy to look you NDIs and tell you that it is okay if you do not know what NDI is. NDI is a network device interface voice over IP protocol that delivers signals wirelessly over standard networks. Basically, what that means is it's magic that lets you transmit wireless audio and video signals in high quality, high resolution, and high frame rates. That means in those times where it's just not practical or possible to run cables, like you need to mount the camera up in the rafters somewhere, or maybe you're in a very crowded environment and running cables just isn't something that you can safely do. That means you can just position the camera by itself and it can transmit everything else wirelessly. And that's because these cameras also do have their own built-in batteries. So the Tail Air right here has a battery that can last about 3.5 hours, and the Tail 2 has a built-in battery that can last about 5 hours. That of course varies a lot depending on how you're using the cameras and what you're streaming from, but that's kind of generally how the batteries could last. So depending on your setup, the YoloBox also has its own built-in battery. That means you could potentially run an entirely wireless setup without needing to connect external power sources for shorter events. All of these devices can be run off of USB power if you do need to run power. But that NDI magic that I talked about, which sounds really great, it does come at a price, and in some cases I do mean that literally. Each of these 3 devices needs its own activation license. So it's $99 to activate NDI on the YoloBox, and then $99 to activate NDI on each of these cameras. And there are complicated licensing reasons between why different companies have to charge licensing fees for NDI, but it is a one-time fee. So if it's something you need to do, you'll have to do that to unlock it on your camera, on the YoloBox, and then you can just use them forever. I think that that's actually a good way to do it, to be honest, not to go on too much of a tangent, but not everybody needs to use NDI. And so if that fee were just built into the price of the device, it would be more expensive. The YoloBox Extreme has NDI built in, included free with the cost of it, but it also costs $2,000. So it's significantly more expensive than the YoloBox Ultra, and then you get NDI included. The cost of these devices is able to be a little bit lower because you only need to pay for that NDI license if you're actually going to use it. If you don't want to pay that NDI fee, or it's just not something that fits into your workflow, both of these cameras can be used via traditional HDMI and USB connections. The Tail 2 has full-size HDMI, SDI, and USB connections, and the Tail Air has micro HDMI and USB connections as well. But all that to say, if you are interested in using NDI, which can be really cool, fun, and helpful, here's how to get it up and running with the OBSBOT cameras on the YoloBox Ultra. In either the desktop or the smartphone app, you'll need to enable NDI mode to use the camera via NDI, and this is also where you can enter your activation key if you purchased a license for the cameras. On the YoloBox Ultra, it's a little more complicated. You do need to go to YOLO's online official store. You can buy your NDI license, and then you need to submit your device's serial number with that license, and they will activate it within 24 hours. So on the cameras themselves, as soon as you enter that license, the camera's NDI is active. On the YoloBox, you have potentially up to 24 hours before your activation activates. So just keep that in mind if you are going to be using this for an event or a setup or a project where you need NDI. Get that all sorted out several days before the actual event happens. Don't wait till you're on location and then try to enter the key, because you probably won't get your YoloBox's NDI activated in time. And once the licenses are activated, you'll be able to use NDI from that point forward. You don't need to re-log in or re-authenticate or anything like that. It's good to go, forever after you've entered it that one time. So now that we've got that activated, we can get into the actual fun part. If you want to add an NDI source on the YoloBox Ultra, you just tap Add Video Source and you just tap NDI. You can do up to 3 NDI devices. This will then scan your network to see if it finds anything. In this case, it found the Tail 2, which is the camera that I have NDI activated on. I can select that, and then that will become an available NDI source on the YoloBox Ultra. Now you're looking at me wirelessly over NDI with the Tail 2. So this right here is the HDMI signal. This is what a direct connected HDMI signal looks like. And now this is the NDI signal. I actually did put a little side-by-side scene here. HDMI is on the left, NDI is on the right. I have also turned on camera tracking because I was waving my hands around. But you can kind of see in terms of quality, smoothness, stability, latency, they are pretty darn close, which is impressive considering that NDI does have to send things entirely wirelessly. Now, like I said, if you don't want to use NDI, you can just use traditional wired connections with these cameras running directly into the YoloBox Ultra. HDMI makes sense, that's simple. I think we're pretty much all familiar with it. USB can be sometimes a little more complicated, but it's quite simple in these cases. You just need to connect them to the USB input on the YoloBox Ultra, and then in one of the OBSBOT apps, you need to enable UVC mode, and that will basically turn it into a USB webcam. But just be aware, as you go through those apps and you sort of see these specialized modes like NDI and UVC, you can only use one of these modes at a time. So you can't use UVC and NDI at the same time, for example. So just keep that in mind if you need to use it as a USB webcam or an NDI source or something else specialized. Plan on only using one of those modes at a time. And then once you have UVC mode enabled on your camera, you can tap Add Video Source, and then either USB 1, 2, or C, whichever one you have the camera connected to, will light up. You can tap that and then add it as a source. And the same is true for HDMI. If you just want to do the traditional way, you can add a video source and then HDMI 1, 2, 3, or 4, wherever it's connected, you can just add that there. In my specific setup, I have 2 HDMI sources, my NDI source, and then my side-by-side comparison. But whether you're using your camera wirelessly or wired, if you're using a PTZ camera, you probably want to be able to PTZ and R in case of the Tail 2. So here is how you can set up PTZ controls through the YoloBox directly. I have been using this little OBSBOT remote, which is super fun. It also, for some reason, has a laser pointer, which is very exciting. I don't want to shine that directly on the camera, but I don't know, that was a fun surprise. I didn't know this had a laser pointer. My dogs enjoy that quite a bit. If you don't want to use the remote like this, or you don't want to use the smartphone or desktop apps to control the cameras, and you want to do everything directly from the YoloBox, it's pretty simple, and here's how to do that. So right now on HDMI 1, I already have the PTZ controls connected. If I tap this little control icon here, see if I go to HDMI 2, that little icon that's kind of in the left part of the screen disappears. If I go to HDMI 1, it's there. That's because this camera is connected. But also, this same camera does not have it through NDI, so I need to add PTZ control to every source, even if it's 2 sources from the same camera, if that makes sense. HDMI 1 over here, if I tap the PTZ control, it will take a second, it will connect, and now I have this screen here, which has a little joystick, and now I can pan, tilt, and zoom, and do all that super fun stuff. I can also recenter the camera, which is pretty sweet. I can choose how fast or slow I want the camera to move, so if I want to do these crazy whip pans, or if I want to try to be a little more intentional and cinematic because I'm doing things live, I can do that. And I can also control the camera's zoom as well from right here, which is really, really fun. What's also cool about that, see this thing up in the upper right that says P1? If I kind of get off track and go over here, I can tap that and boom, now I'm back to my main shot, which has been very helpful throughout this video. If I do something like turn on tracking and then I need to turn off tracking, and now I want to make sure the camera isn't the same shot that it was at before, I can just do P1. So let's go ahead and add PTZ controls to this camera here, the Tail Air. All I need to do is tap the gear icon on the YoloBox, tap PTZ control, and then this screen is gonna come up where I need to input my camera's IP address and a port. For these cameras, for the OBSBOT cameras, you can use port 52381, and then your IP address is going to be a little bit different depending on your camera. You can find your camera's IP address in the desktop app by clicking the gear icon and going to the device management section. On the mobile app, you can click the 3 dots in the bottom left and then scroll down to About Device to see your camera's IP address. The cameras can create IP addresses automatically, which is what I'm doing right now, or you can set them manually if you need to, if you need that full control. So now I got the IP address from the mobile app on my phone, and now I have PTZ controls for the tail air right here through the YoloBox Ultra, which is very, very cool. And I can then set my presets. So I showed you presets on the Tail 2 a moment ago. If I want to have this shot, kind of this wide shot here as a preset, I can just tap the P+, and now I have a preset right there. If I want to say, have this shot, which I thought was kind of fun, where you could see the Tail 2 and me in the shot, so you can kind of see the camera I'm looking at. I can add that as another preset, and then I could even do something like if I wanted to, let's speed this up a little bit. If I wanted to go here, maybe zoom in, this is where we can have some real heart-to-heart discussions. I can add this as another preset as well. So now I can just tap these presets, go here to this shot, I can then go over here to this shot, and then I can even go here for some serious discussions about serious camera business. And if I do want to readjust any of these presets, if I want to reframe them, I can just tap and hold and then click edit. And now I can readjust how the shot looks, click update, and then that will be the new preset for the one that I selected. And if you just want to delete one entirely, you can tap and hold and then click delete, tap delete, and then it will go away. So hopefully you can see why being able to totally control everything about your cameras directly from the YoloBox is pretty awesome and probably something you would want to do. There is a downside though that I want you to be aware of, which is that as far as I'm aware, there's no way to adjust a camera without it being live. So the YoloBox Ultra does not have a director mode like a program preview mode. And even though the YoloBox Extreme does, when you adjust your PTZ controls, as soon as you tap that icon and it connects and then brings up your PTZ control screen, this is what then becomes live. So it becomes the output. So that means if you have one camera active and then you want to kind of adjust the other before you switch to it, as soon as you start adjusting it on here, it's going to become the live camera that people see. Very important to be aware of. If you want to make camera adjustments to a camera that's not currently live, like right now in my setup, if I were on this camera, but I wanted to adjust this camera without you seeing it, like this shot right here is a little, it's a little off, I can choose this source, and then that's when I have to use one of my other remotes, either this physical control or one of the apps, to then choose where I would like my setup to be. And in this case, we can adjust the camera. I'm just hitting the presets that I had set on the remote. They did transfer. The ones I set in the YoloBox now are in the remote as well. And now I can go over here, and this camera's totally set. I can talk on this shot. I can go back over here. I can then set the other preset, and now I can come here, and I'm already zoomed in, and you didn't even see the camera go back and forth. So if you need to make adjustments to cameras while they're not active on the YoloBox, you need to use an external control, otherwise everyone's going to see your adjustments. And it does take a little bit of practice using the controls. If you want to do live adjustments where the camera's pan, tilting, and zooming and all that while people see it, making it look not robotic, it does take a little bit of practice. And you might have even noticed in these shots here, when I go through the presets, the movements do look, pretty robotic, like it's quick and robotic. So depending on how you set those up and how you want to use them, I like having things look as smooth and natural as possible. So if that's the look that you're going for, the way that you set up and implement your presets and your pan, tilt, zoom controls is going to kind of, you need to practice that to make things look their absolute best. Now, just very quickly, if you do have this OBSBOT Smart Remote, which I really, really like, not just because it has a laser pointer, and you want to pair this with your cameras, here's how to do that. It is super duper simple. You just turn on the side switch on the remote. You have 3 potential camera controls at the bottom, each one with 3 presets. And so if you want to say make, the Tail 2 camera 1, all I need to do is press the power button on the Tail 2 3 times. So the camera's on, I press the power button 3 times, and then I hold down source 1 and the human AI tracking button. I hold that down, and then it will flash, and now this camera is camera 1. And so when I go there, this light turns green, and now I can control camera 1. If I want to make this other camera camera 2, push the power button 3 times, hold down 2 and human tracking, and then this will become camera 2, and then I can do the same thing for camera 3. And that's how you pair your cameras, and then you can start pan, tilting, and zooming with the remote, which is just like really, really fun, by the way. So I don't know, I definitely encourage you to get this remote if you can. I feel like it's a really handy thing, and it's nice to have a physical remote, not having to go into a phone app all the time anytime you want to adjust something. Now, I do think it's also important to talk about audio with these cameras. They have built-in microphones, but the Tail 2 does have a 3.5mm audio input, so you can run audio that way. And then of course you can always pull audio through HDMI. So in the YoloBox, I can bring in my HDMI audio sources if I want to. In this case right now, I'm actually just running my audio, just the Hollyland Lark M2 wireless system directly into the YoloBox. That's mic 1, and that's what's being mixed in as my audio. But being able to capture audio from the cameras, and in the case of the Tail 2, being able to connect an audio source could be really important if you have somebody in front of this camera speaking, but they're far away and you need to mix that in with other sources through the YoloBox, or if you're just in a situation where you need to get natural sound from a camera, say you're doing like a sporting event and you have this camera kind of near the crowd and you want to be able, when you cut to that shot, you want to be able to mix in crowd sound, or even when that shot's not active, just take the audio from that, have it mixed in so you can hear the crowd while other cameras are capturing other shots. It's kind of cool that you can use the YoloBox to then mix in your audio from your different camera sources. And you can also add an audio delay with the YoloBox. So right here you can see on my mic I have a 330 millisecond delay. And if I go down here to these other sources, I can tap them to add, I can tap the delay button to add a delay. I have people send me messages pretty often worried that their streaming setups are broken because their audio and video is out of sync. And that is just something totally normal that happens. It just has to do with the difference, like in weight, you could call it, between video and audio signals. Sometimes you need to just add a little bit of delay to your audio to let the video catch up, and then everything can be back in sync. So it might take a little bit of experimenting depending on if you're using the camera or if you're using the YoloBox audio directly, how to mix those things together. If I go to my side-by-side shot here of NDI and HDMI, I have noticed there is a little bit difference in latency. So if you look at this, these are pretty close, but they're not 100% in sync. And so you might even notice as I clap my hands, they don't match perfectly on both of these. So my NDI source, which is being, sent wirelessly, versus my HDMI source, which is connected, through a wire, through a cable that can be a lot faster than doing it wirelessly. My latency is slightly different between these, which doesn't really matter except in cases when you're using multiple types of cameras. So if you're using some cameras wirelessly through NDI and other cameras connected through HDMI and you need everything to be absolutely perfectly in sync, you might find that there are some latency latency So it's usually a really good idea, if you want the absolute best audio syncing possible, to make sure that all of your cameras are connected the same way. They're all connected through NDI, or they're all connected through HDMI, or whatever it might be. If you have to mix connection types and you are having some syncing issues or some latency issues with your audio, try to then put one camera that's out of sync on something that doesn't require it to be perfectly in sync. So again, if you're doing the sports event and you have a camera on the crowd and it's capturing that audio, it's not gonna matter if that's slightly out of sync. Oftentimes for me, I'll have a top-down camera in shots, and it doesn't really matter if that's a couple of frames out of sync. No one's really gonna notice, but you are gonna notice my words don't match my mouth. That's gonna be a bigger problem. And I have talked about the OBSBOT apps several times throughout this video, but there is absolutely something very important that you can only do in the apps currently. So you can use the YoloBox to control everything about the cameras, as I've shown, except color. If you need to adjust your white balance, your exposure, your color, there's currently no way to do that within the YoloBox. You need to do that through either the desktop or mobile apps. And that can be really important, especially if you are mixing cameras like I'm doing right now. If you're using multiple of the same camera, they should have even the same automatic settings, and then things should match pretty well. But sometimes you're in environments where your white balance is off and you need to adjust it, exactly how you want it, or you're mixing cameras like I'm doing now. These two cameras have totally different sensors, totally different lenses. They handle colors differently. So I did have to use the OBSBOT apps to try my best to make them match as closely as possible so that I could cut between them without it being too much of a distraction. I forget which camera I'm looking at here. There we go. Unfortunately, the cameras do connect wirelessly to the app. So a lot of times what I do is either just on my computer over here, I have the desktop app open, or I just have my phone ready to go. And if I decide I need to adjust something because it's not looking right, I can just do that without having to take the cameras off their stands and connect them with a cable or anything. It can all just be done wirelessly, which is pretty convenient. I'm hoping there will be a future update at some point with the YoloBox where you can at least do basic image adjustments and color correction directly in here. So I know this has been a lot of info, and like I said at the beginning of this video, these cameras have gotten so advanced and there's so much you can do with them. I think something really important to remember is that you don't need to master every feature and every setting right away. Find out just what you need for your specific setup. Maybe you just need the cameras to be connected and you don't need to worry about PTZ controls right away, or you don't need to worry about NDI right away. And then as your workflow evolves and develops, you might then decide, oh, this extra feature would be handy, this extra feature, and you can kind of add to your toolbox over time. You don't have to master everything immediately. Even if you're using this for serious work, it can still be really fun to learn how to use this stuff. It can be exciting. And if you keep your workload manageable so that you continue having fun and enjoying the process of putting it all together, the end results of what you make will always be significantly better. But with everything we've covered today, you should be able to put together a really awesome multicam, wireless or wired or combination thereof, PTZ live streaming podcasting setup.